Hi everyone, welcome back to Rick's English channel. Tired of knowing a word when you read it, but your mind going totally blank when you try to speak? Today, we fix that.
Yeah, it truly is. It's just a universally frustrating experience for language learners. I mean, you
Okay.
reach that inevitable moment in a conversation, right, where you absolutely need a high caliber word,
Oh, totally.
and you can feel it sitting right there in the back of your mind, but you just end up grasping at empty air. Or even worse, you actually retrieve the core word, but then you pair it with entirely the wrong preposition.
Right, leaving you sounding super awkward right when you were, aiming for articulate.
Exactly.
It's basically the linguistic equivalent of pulling out your phone in an emergency to call a crucial contact, only to realize you saved their name but completely forgot to input their actual phone number.
That is a perfect way to describe it, yeah.
Like the illusion of possession is there, but the utility is literally zero. And that is the exact disparity we are tackling in this deep dive today. Our mission is explicitly tailored for you, the intermediate to advanced learner.
For sure. Because at this level, we need to orchestrate a fundamental methodological shift.
Right. And by the time we wrap up today, you're going to learn how to conclusively distinguish between just merely recognizing a word and actually being capable of wielding it. We're going to master collocations, apply like a highly effective three-stage learning process, and build a realistic 7-day vocabulary routine.
Yeah, the goal is really to move you away from the passive hoarding of vocabulary lists,
Yeah.
and move toward a dynamic system where you can actually convert a select group of new words into confident, spontaneous communication.
So let's just start by dismantling what I think is like the most pervasive trap for learners at this level, which is the illusion of quote unquote knowing a word.
Yes.
Because the default assumption is that if you can read a sentence, spot a word, and successfully translate it into your native language, you've officially learned it, right?
Right. I call that the isolated translation trap. Let's take a word that most of our listeners likely have sitting in their passive vocabulary right now. The word reluctant.
Okay, good one.
So a learner encounters this, looks it up, sees it means unwilling or hesitant, writes that definition down, and they mentally check a box. They just think the job is done.
But to me, it sounds like treating vocabulary as a list of isolated puzzle pieces rather than actually looking at the picture on the front of the box to see how they connect to the pieces around them.
That is exactly it, because words do not exist as independent, solitary objects in the wild. They live exclusively inside structural patterns.
Wait, structural pattern.
Yeah, so to actually use a word naturally, you must understand its grammatical behavior and the specific company it keeps. With our example, native speakers routinely say things like, I am reluctant to make a decision, or she was reluctant to discuss the problem. The non-negotiable pattern there is reluctant to do something.
Oh, I see. Meaning, if I try to construct a sentence on the fly and say, I am reluctant for making a decision, the person listening is going to understand my core meaning, obviously.
Right, they'll know what you mean.
But the structural scaffolding is completely incorrect. The delivery instantly signals that I am translating in my head rather than, speaking naturally.
Exactly. And this demonstrates why the initial question you ask upon encountering new vocabulary needs a serious upgrade.
What do you mean? Like asking, what does this mean?
Yeah, asking what does this mean is a beginner's reflex. An advanced learner asks, how is this normally used? What specific nouns or verbs frequently appear immediately before or after it? What sentence pattern does its underlying grammar actually demand?
So vocabulary is a network, not a grocery list, which forces us to look at the practical application. If memorizing isolated translations is the wrong approach, how do we systematically capture these networks without just completely overwhelming ourselves?
Well, we capture them by prioritizing ready-made building blocks. In linguistic terms, we were talking about collocations.
Collocations. Right.
Yeah, a collocation is essentially a group of words that naturally, frequently, and predictably appear together. Let's look at the word significant. It's a highly useful professional word. But if your notebook entry merely reads significant, important, or noticeable, you are doing yourself a massive disservice.
Because I shouldn't just be capturing the definition, right? I should be capturing the actual chunks of language that naturally carry it.
Precisely.
I need to be writing down phrases like a significant difference or play a significant role or have a significant impact on.
Right, and the cognitive benefit of this approach cannot be overstated. When you learn the phrase, have a significant impact on, as a single cohesive unit, you drastically reduce the amount of real-time cognitive processing required while you are actually speaking.
So I'm not scrambling to construct the phrase word by word, desperately hoping I chose the right preposition to follow impact.
Exactly. Your brain just deploys the entire building block at once. It leaves your mental bandwidth free to focus on the actual idea you're trying to express.
Okay, wait, I hear that, but there is undeniable pressure, especially in professional or academic environments, to sound, smart. Doesn't advanced English mean finding the longest, rarest, most complicated words possible to impress people?
No, actually, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of what sophisticated communication entails. Sophistication is almost never about using the most obscure, rare words you can unearth.
Really? Because people definitely try to do that.
Oh, all the time. But doing that usually backfires. It makes you sound artificial, or honestly, worse, insecure. True advanced English is about combining relatively common words in highly precise, natural, and flexible ways.
So clarity and precision always have to take priority over complexity.
Without question. A sophisticated speaker doesn't choose a complicated word just to appear intelligent, right?
Yeah.
They choose the most accurate expression for the context.
Right.
Complexity is only valuable when it is absolutely necessary to express a genuinely complex idea. If you're throwing in dense vocabulary just to show off, you are simply muddying the waters and making it harder for your listener to follow your argument.
Okay, so assuming we've accepted that we need to learn structural patterns and collocations instead of isolated definitions, how do we physically encode these building blocks into our brains so they actually stick?
Right, because just understanding it doesn't mean you'll remember it.
Exactly, because understanding a concept intellectually doesn't stop it from just evaporating the moment we close the textbook.
Well, we anchor it using what we call the three-layer method. It is a highly practical system for embedding a word in your long-term memory.
Okay, three-layer method, let's walk through it.
Let's use the word overwhelming. The first layer is the essential meaning. Here, you identify the core concept, something extremely intense, powerful, or difficult to manage. You explicitly avoid bogging yourself down by memorizing a dense, formal dictionary definition.
Got it. You just want the conceptual anchor. So grabbing the core concept without memorizing a paragraph-long dictionary entry makes a lot of sense, but that still leaves us with a floating concept. How do we anchor it to actual grammar?
That happens in layer 2, the usage pattern. This is where you collect 2 or 3 of those natural collocations we just discussed.
Oh, okay. Like what?
For overwhelming, you might write down an overwhelming amount of information, or the verb structure, feel overwhelmed by something. And notice that we're intentionally including both overwhelming and overwhelmed.
To give a sense of the broader word family and its variations, right?
Exactly. Which sets us up for layer 3, the personal application.
Ooh, I love this part.
Yeah, this is where you create a sentence that is authentically true, relevant, or emotionally meaningful to your actual life.
Mm.
The emotional weight is the adhesive that makes the memory permanent.
So saying something like, the overwhelming storm destroyed the village, is useless unless I was actually in a storm.
Right, because the human brain is ruthlessly efficient. It just discards abstract information that lacks personal relevance.
That makes so much sense. My brain knows I'm lying because I live in Ohio and haven't seen a hurricane. The artificiality just makes it disposable. But saying, I felt completely overwhelmed by phrasal verbs when I started learning English, that sticks because it has emotional weight attached to it.
Exactly. It's tethered to a genuine frustration you've experienced. When a piece of vocabulary is connected to your own ambitions, your own difficulties, or your own genuine opinions, it remains vastly more accessible to your neural network. Yeah, you do not need pages of exhaustive notes. A short, meticulously designed entry utilizing those 3 layers is infinitely more powerful than a massive spreadsheet of disconnected, unemotional facts.
So we know how to encode a word structurally and emotionally, but we have to talk about the physical workflow, like when and where are we actually practicing this? Because we can't possibly run every single new word we encounter through this intense 3-layer process.
No, attempting that would be mentally exhausting and entirely inefficient. This is where we introduce the notice, retrieve, produce cycle.
Okay, notice, retrieve, produce.
The very first stage is notice, and the guiding principle here is intense selectivity. You should only be targeting words that are directly relevant to your daily routine, your career trajectory, or your specific communicative goals.
I see. So purpose dictates vocabulary. If I'm a business professional, I'm noticing and prioritizing words like allocate, feasible, or constraint because those function as currency in my daily meetings. But if I'm an academic researcher, I'm completely ignoring those in favor of words like interpret, derive, or contradict.
Spot on. Once you've noticed and selected a highly relevant word, you move to the second stage, retrieve.
And what does that look like?
This means actively testing yourself to recall the word without immediately glancing down at your notes or your screen. Let's say you want to learn the expression, take something for granted. You have to prompt yourself by asking, what was that expression that means failing to appreciate something because it seems so normal?
Wait, but covering the answer and struggling to remember it feels incredibly uncomfortable. Like, I usually just end up staring blankly at a wall for 2 minutes, feeling completely stupid. Shouldn't learning feel smooth? At what point do I just look at the answer so I'm not wasting my study time?
Well, a struggle shouldn't be a 10-minute agonizing ordeal, right? It is about enduring just enough cognitive friction, perhaps 10 to 15 seconds of genuine mental reaching before you check the answer.
10 to 15 seconds.
Because that micro struggle, that brief moment of discomfort, is exactly the biological mechanism that signals to your brain that this specific piece of data is important. If the retrieval is entirely smooth and effortless because you looked at the answer too quickly, your brain literally doesn't bother flagging it for long-term storage.
Wow. That reframes the frustration completely. The discomfort isn't a sign of failure, it's the actual mechanism of encoding.
Exactly. You need to trigger that friction.
So after we struggle, experience the friction, and successfully retrieve, take something for granted, we move to the final stage. Produce.
Yes, and the cardinal rule for the production stage is the 24-hour rule. You must use the new expression in a meaningful generative way within 24 hours of learning it.
Okay, but I don't necessarily have to track down a native speaker at a coffee shop to achieve that, do I? I just have to output the word in a way where I am the author of the thought.
Correct. A voice recording on your phone, an email to a colleague, a private journal entry, or even leaving a YouTube comment saying, a common misconception about vocabulary is that memorizing more words makes you fluent. Any context where you are generating the language yourself qualifies.
And then we just repeat that.
Yeah, then you apply the principle of spaced repetition. You revisit and produce that word again after 1 day, then perhaps 3 days, then a week.
So it doesn't have to be super complicated.
No. It doesn't require downloading an elaborate algorithmic flashcard application. It just requires consistent active usage before the memory trace naturally fades.
This intense cycle of noticing, retrieving, and producing highlights a really important tension, though. If the process requires this much cognitive bandwidth, I have to be incredibly careful about curating my mental library.
This brings us to the vital distinction between your passive vocabulary and your active vocabulary. Passive vocabulary consists of all the words you can recognize and comprehend when reading a book or listening to a speaker. Active vocabulary is the much smaller, highly curated subset of words you can actually retrieve and use on demand in real time.
So it is entirely normal and totally okay for the passive library to be vastly larger, even for highly proficient native speakers.
Oh, it is inevitable. The persistent mistake advanced learners make is assuming that every single word they recognize must be aggressively pushed into their active vocabulary.
Yeah, that would be impossible.
If you encounter a highly specific scientific term in an article, you might only ever need to understand it in context. You do not need to actively practice it for your next casual conversation. Efficient learning demands ruthless selection.
And part of that ruthless curation is understanding the nuance of the words we do choose to activate, right? Which brings us to register and tone, because words carry distinct social weights.
Register is absolutely critical. Let's say you disagree with a colleague's strategy. You could say, I don't like the idea, which is direct, clear, and neutral. Alternatively, you could say, I'm not particularly enthusiastic about the idea, which is softer, diplomatic, and leaves room for negotiation. Or you could say, I have serious reservations about the proposal, which is highly formal and indicates significant structural concerns.
Right. They all communicate a negative reaction, but if I use the wrong register, the social dynamic gets weird fast. Like, if a friend asks what pizza to order and I say, I have serious reservations about your proposal to add pineapple, I'm going to sound ridiculous.
Well, unless it is a deeply philosophical debate about pineapple on pizza.
Which it often is.
True. But seriously, without understanding whether a word is neutral, academic, humorous, or potentially abrasive, you risk using perfectly grammatical English in a completely socially inappropriate manner.
Which leads directly to a mistake I have definitely fallen victim to, which is the danger of forcing fancy words.
Oh yeah, the forcing words trap.
Yeah. Like when I first learned the word meticulous, meaning extremely careful and attentive to detail, I was so thrilled to have this advanced vocabulary word that I started deploying it everywhere. I called my dog meticulous. I called my breakfast meticulous.
I have to ask what a meticulous egg actually looks like.
Yeah.
But, this illustrates the danger of treating words like algebraic variables that you can just plug into any equation.
I thought I was being incredibly sophisticated, but I was completely ignoring how native speakers actually apply the word.
Right, because knowing the dictionary definition of meticulous does not grant you permission to attach it to any noun in the English language. We can talk about meticulous planning, a meticulous process, or a meticulous researcher. But a meticulous breakfast is a glaringly unnatural combination.
So true.
You must observe the kinds of subjects and situations that typically surround a word. Never force a complex word into a sentence just to show off that you learned it.
That makes total sense. Okay, we have all these incredible theoretical concepts: collocations, emotional weight, cognitive friction, register, and, of course, avoiding the meticulous breakfast. Let's translate this into an actionable system. The bridge between theory and practice here is the one-word, five-sentence challenge.
Yes, this is a brilliant exercise specifically designed to build linguistic flexibility. You take one useful expression, let's use come to terms with, which means gradually accepting a difficult reality or situation.
Right.
Your challenge is to construct 5 entirely different sentences using that single expression.
So the goal is to manipulate the variables, right? Changing the subjects, the time frames, the context. So sentence 1 might be, he is still trying to come to terms with the project's failure.
Perfect.
Sentence 2 alters the timeline. It took me months to come to terms with the organizational change. Sentence 3 makes it broader. Learning to come to terms with uncertainty is crucial for professional growth.
Exactly. By forcing the expression into different grammatical environments and contexts, you stop viewing it as a rigid, memorized string of text. You start understanding it as a dynamic, flexible tool that can be adapted to whatever thought you're trying to express.
Okay, let's zoom out and map this onto a concrete 7-day routine. Because the promise here is a system that integrates into a normal work week without consuming hours of your day. Walk us through the mechanics of the week.
The routine is designed to be entirely manageable. Days 1 and 2 are dedicated to selection and connection.
Selection and connection.
Right. You select just 3 to 5 highly relevant words. Then you connect them using the 3-layer method we talked about, recording their essential meaning, a couple of collocations, their register, and your personal emotionally resonant sentence.
Got it. Taking the time to build that foundational entry. What happens on days 3, 4, and 5?
This is the active output phase,
Yeah.
and we vary the mechanics each day. Day 3 is retrieve. You test yourself with that cognitive friction we discussed, trying to recall the expression without looking at the notes. Day 4 is speak. You record a quick 1-minute voice memo on your phone, attempting to weave those expressions into a spontaneous spoken thought. Speaking forces real-time cognitive retrieval, mimicking the pressure of an actual conversation.
And day 5 is right, like drafting a short paragraph, perhaps an imaginary email or a journal entry.
Yeah, because writing engages a different cognitive process. It allows you to slow down, meticulously review your structural patterns, and check your tone and prepositions without the immediate pressure of speech.
I like that balance. Then day 6 is compare. This is where I go back to the original article, podcast, or report where I initially found the words right. I compare the sentences I generated against the authentic source material to verify my usage.
Exactly. It provides immediate contextual feedback. You can spot if you used a word in the wrong register or missed a vital preposition.
And the final day?
Finally, day 7 is review and decide. You test yourself one last time. Words that feel comfortable and natural move into an occasional review pile. Words that are still stubbornly difficult stay in the active rotation for another week.
Makes sense.
And here is the most crucial part. Words that you realize are no longer relevant to your goals or that you simply aren't finding opportunities to use are removed.
Wait, hold on. Let's pause on that because the instinct is to hoard. You're saying that after a full week of encoding, speaking, writing, and comparing, I should just permanently remove words that aren't relevant anymore after all that work.
Yes, absolutely. It is one of the most liberating truths for language learners. A good learning system is a flexible tool belt. It is not a museum.
A tool belt, not a museum.
Right. You are not obligated to preserve every single word you encounter under glass forever. If a word isn't serving your daily communicative needs, drop it entirely and make room in your cognitive load for one that will.
Wow, that completely changes the psychological approach to vocabulary. We have covered profound ground today. We started by dismantling the trap of isolated translations, realizing we must capture collocations and structural patterns to actually utilize a word.
We established the three-layer method anchoring vocabulary with essential meaning, usage patterns, and the vital personal application that gives a word lasting emotional weight.
We discussed the notice, retrieve, produce cycle, learning to embrace the biological necessity of cognitive friction during retrieval.
And we learned to ruthlessly curate our mental libraries, respecting the vast difference between active and passive vocabulary, tuning into register, and of course keeping our breakfast out of our meticulous vocabulary practice.
All of this culminates in a highly sustainable, adaptable 7-day routine.
It all distills down to a single fundamental philosophy, really. 5 words that you can competently, accurately, and flexibly deploy in the real world are infinitely more valuable to your life and career than 50 words that you can only vaguely recognize on a multiple-choice test.
That is the ultimate metric of fluency right there. I want to challenge you, the listener, right now. Grab one expression we explored today, put it through the 5-sentence challenge, and drop your best, most emotionally resonant sentence in the comments below. Take that action within the next 24 hours to trigger that encoding process. If you want to study English systematically and improve your listening, speaking, vocabulary, and natural expression step by step, please subscribe to my English podcast series. We'll see you in the next deep dive.